Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Andy Pushlik. I'm the National Practice Group Leader of the Dentons Canada Labor and Employment Group. I'm also the Practice Group Lead for the Toronto office. And I'm going to be your moderator today. Many of you have been regular attendees, but there are a few housekeeping notes for some of our newer participants today. As you know, Dentons and the Employment Group, we do a lot of webinars every year, but today is one of my favorites. For those of you who are regularly tuning into these webinars, you'll know that in the June webinar, which is the last webinar before the summer break, we typically host a panel discussion amongst leading HR executives and in-house counsel. And today we're going to continue that tradition, having assembled a panel of some of Canada's leading HR professionals who represent a broad spectrum of the Canadian economy. So it's my pleasure to have with me Nicole Delage, who's the Senior Vice President of People for Life Labs. Nicole is an agile global human resources executive with a passion for building high-performance teams, cultures, and organizations. Business-minded and practical, Nicole has deep experience in partnering with executives in union and non-union environments. And during her career, she has worked across industries including healthcare, manufacturing, and financial technology. So Nicole, thanks so much for joining us today. Hanan Haddad is the Area Director of Human Resources for Hilton Canada. Hanan is a versatile human resources professional with over 20 years of experience and knowledge in human resources management. She has a keen understanding of service culture and working with a diverse team, developing people, strategy, and processes to ensure goals are met while developing and growing brand pride and colleague engagement. She is also an active member of the Hospitality Human Resources Professional Association, holding various positions on the board of directors. And last but certainly not least, Laura Kavanaugh is the Senior Vice President, Human Resources for Postmedia. Laura is a seasoned HR executive who throughout her career has created, developed, and activated the HR function for a range of industries. Her focus is on building programs and policies that deliver success for the business while supporting employees, enabling learning and development to build the next generation of leaders. Prior to Postmedia, Laura worked in financial technology, entertainment, and the automotive industries. So this is a great panel. Thank you so much for giving your time. These are three very, very busy leaders. And like I said, we are really grateful to have all of you here. So people are not here to listen to me. They're here to listen to you. So let's get right to it. And it wouldn't be a Dentons employment webinar on a Friday, on a nice day, if we didn't start by asking something about the pandemic. And I know we're done with it. I know people are ready to move on. But if you were to look, Nicole, over the last 2 years, how would you say the pandemic has changed your people strategy?
As you said, it's hard to say that to find somebody that hasn't been affected, and like many of the businesses of the participants in April 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, we saw our revenues go down by 70%. But what's the expression? You should never leave a crisis unattended, or find a way of maximizing a crisis. And despite all the dramatic global impact that COVID has had, it really became an impetus for change and further supporting the business transformation that many organizations are going through. And I would say that how it's changed our people strategy is in response to those changing dynamics, business dynamic, a new really vision for the 5-year plan for the organization. It became essential for us to readjust that people strategy. And excited that we came up with 4 pillars to support that people strategy. And those pillars are our tagline with Life Lab. So life healthy, life resilient, life purposeful, and life recognized. And that really, with our people strategy and those 4 pillars, they're really our North Star. They're really how we look at all the programs, how the policies and the practices we're developing, ultimately to continue to attract and retain talent, but also deliver on our business goals. So I'm sure there's similar things happening with others, but in a nutshell, that's how I would kind of provide a high level overview of our new people strategy.
That's great. Thanks, Nicole. And Hanan, if we move to the hospitality industry, that was one of the kind of key industries that was really disrupted. So if you look over where Hilton has gone over the last 2 years, how would you say it impacted the company's people strategy?
Thanks, Andy. Absolutely. As an industry, we did see how severely impacted we were as a result of the pandemic. And I'll be honest, we all thought it was going to be 1 or 2 months of lockdowns and changes, and that kept extending and extending and extending. As an industry, as hotels, we were deemed an essential service, and as such, we were permitted to stay open, but severely impacted by restrictions. Restaurants had to close, banquet rooms had to close, and we were really functioning as a rooms support to the community. I think what the pandemic did for us was have us refocus and move forward some of our strategies that included things like technology. How do we utilize technology for our teams? How do we help our teams be more technology friendly and comfortable with technology? As a lot of our employees are labor employees, they work with their hands, they're not at a desk at a computer. And how can we utilize technology to help them integrate better, serve our guests better, spend more face time, and how do we train them now to provide those levels of service to people through things like masks and barriers and glass. And that was a big change for us. So a lot of training for our team members, looking for team members that were quick to adapt, retraining team members in different areas so that, in the past, you would have team members that would work in specific areas, and now we're looking for team members, and our strategy included training and cross-training to allow them to be flexible to work in different areas and provide them more opportunities that way. And communication. How do you focus your communication? Communication strategies in hotels are fairly simple. Everybody's contained in one building. And with the pandemic, that wasn't the case. Many people were home. Some people were able to work remotely. So how does your communication change for your people in terms of your people strategy and how you communicate with your people? How do you educate them? Flexibility became a bigger issue for us. How do we make our business and our scheduling more flexible for the teams as we want to, allow teams the opportunity to do different things? And the pandemic made it that we needed to be more flexibility. So cross-training, flexibility, scheduling, and then communication and technology really impacted our people focus. And we had to add more and more of those pieces into that people strategy.
Thanks, Sinan. And it occurs to me that I never even really thought about, the training that would be going on when you have now barriers in front when you're dealing with frontline customers. And one of the great things about the panel is all of you are national employers. You all have offices and not just in operations, not just in Ontario. That's particularly true for you, Laura. So when you kind of look back over those 2 years and how you were trying to kind of navigate both with facilities in Ontario and people in Vancouver, and then of course you have a lot of people in Ottawa that go over between Quebec and Ontario each day. When you look now in terms of your organization, what do you see in terms of your people strategy that's different than it was 2 years ago?
So I think it's a lot of what both Nicole and Hanan mentioned. It's around the flexibility. We took the position that the first and foremost health and safety was our key, and being deemed an essential service, we obviously had to have people who were in during the thick of the pandemic. So it was a lot around communication, education, quickly pivoting to a much more flexible response, how much more we engaged with our employees, and we looked at what were the solutions that we could all work together on. And I think it was great learning for us as an organization overall, because something we take pride in is how quickly we actually pivoted and how well we were able to weather the pandemic. And I think that has become the cornerstone of our go forward strategy in dealing with our employees, that the future of work is flexible, and that's how we're going to engage with our employees going forward.
So if we kind of stick with this theme of the pandemic, we're now into this, hopefully the true return to office phase. I can tell you, and you'll all know, we've done multiple publications about return to office, including one that we've now just published from our colleague in Ottawa. And we've always thought that this was actually the phase, and then hopefully now this truly is. So Hilton's an interesting case because you had a lot of people who they were already going into the office, frontline workers. But where is your organization at now in turning the corner and getting everyone back into the office, or what is the strategy on that?
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. We didn't go home. We didn't work from home. We stayed in the office. Obviously, due to the restrictions, we had limited staffing and limited services offered across the hotels across the country. But we were still in the office. And really what it came down to is how do we provide a safe work environment for our teams in the office and for our guests? You know, Hilton launched the Clean Stay program in 2020, with taking into consideration science and government regulations. How do we work safely? How do we keep our buildings open? How do we ensure our team members feel safe and those protocols in place and the training for that? How do we provide a safe environment for our guests because they're still coming into the buildings? And in some of our hotels, we have guests that are coming in with hospital stays. So we have guests with, health restrictions and health requirements. So we didn't really close the offices. We limited the amount of staff. So for us, it was how do we ramp back up and go from limited service to a full service? Restaurants were able to reopen again. How do we bring our team members back into the restaurant? Banquets was able to open again. People were having meetings, although in a smaller scale. And a lot of it really was communication and training with our teams. Here are the safety protocols. Here's how you can be safe. Here's how our guests can be safe. And these are the protocols that we need to follow moving forward. So our return to the office was more of a return to full service, and integrating those teams back, having the teams that are here help the team members that are coming back feel safe about coming back to the office or the hotel, pardon me. What does that look like? Communicating, talking to the teams, providing all the PPEs that are required, and also some of the PPEs that they were asking for, that were maybe not necessarily regulated by government. And that's really what our sort of return to full service looked like, is how do we bring everybody back to full hours, full service. And happy to say that we are in a very good place right now. And I have all our team members in the majority of our hotels back to work and running full swing ahead.
And definitely, there's a lot of people around the city with conferences season too, so it's good to hear that. Laura, what about post media? And you have a significant footprint in terms of corporate employees. You obviously have other employees who would have been in other environments, but specifically for those office employees, how are you dealing with the return to office phenomenon?
So we actually have not returned anyone to the offices yet. We're just starting that phase. And again, back to coming up with something that was flexible. We went out, we surveyed a couple of times, we listened to our employees, and we are really pleased that we were able to introduce a flexible working program, so that this allows the employee to work with their leaders out in the field and decide how and when they want to come back to the offices, where we have offices for them to come back to. And, it was also listening to some of the concerns that many people have, and quite frankly still have, with regards to the pandemic, and seeing how we could accommodate those so that people feel as comfortable as possible coming into the office and feeling that they are in a safe environment, and that they can interact safely. And so for us, by the beginning of September, we will start to see our employees in our corporate offices, or in our offices in general, return to the office in some form of hybrid working arrangement.
Hybrid is such the buzzword. I think everyone is trying to maintain flexibility, and it's interesting to hear the different approaches. So at Life Labs, Nicole, similar type of situation. You have a bunch of people who would have been working all the way through the pandemic and not from home. Now you're going to be trying to return potentially a large employee base. How are you dealing and leading through that issue? Oh, I think you're on mute.
All right. I'm the first one that made the
That's right.
mistake. So
Has to
Laura and
happen.
Hanan, you're okay now. I've done it. So I was just going to say that, like Hanan and Laura said, flexibility is a key element. We have moved to hybrid. We have operations in different provinces, so legislation is a little bit different. A majority of our employees have continued throughout the pandemic to serve our customers, and we're not deemed essential services, but we had to continue, obviously, to serve doctors, hospitals, physicians, and so forth. What's been interesting, and the reason I bring it up is because I don't know that I had a lot more to add to the flexibility and component, but two things. One is we saw a divide between our frontline employees and our corporate types of employees who were able to work from home. Our frontline employees felt abandoned. We did it for their protection, to ensure PPEs were available, not to create more risk of transmitting COVID, to keep our customers safe. And so that for me is a really an important learning, because you might be doing things with the right intent, but how it lands is not always easy. With remote or hybrid, whichever approach you take, I don't have the answers, but for me, what's top of mind is how do you maintain your culture? Because you will, I think we will have to find other ways of ensuring that you're onboarding your new employees, the employees that move into new groups, that you create those connections differently. And I don't think it means, in our view, to go back fully to in person, but being purposeful about when you do bring people together. And we currently are in the midst of our a big engagement campaign, which is about reconnecting with our 7,500 employees across Canada, knowing that those interactions, those thank you, those moments of appreciation make a big difference.
So I want to stay on this topic just for a moment, and a lot of what you've said is the same types of issues that we as a law firm encounter. And as you're trying to use this as an opportunity for employee engagement and use this as an opportunity to communicate with your employees, how are you trying to put the value proposition out there to really explain to employees, well, look, I've been working at home for 2 years, I'm just as productive. What do you say to that employee? And I think this is something that every business probably across the world is dealing with. It's not an Ontario issue or a Canada issue or a US. How do you say to that employee, it is important for you to actually be in the office, or remind them of that? And I'll throw it open to the group.
And I can start.
Go ahead, please.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead, Hanan.
I mean, in hospitality, it's fairly simple. You know, your guests are in the hotel, and you need to be here to be of service to the guests. And generally, folks that are inclined to work in this industry understand that, and they know they're here for people. They want people. They want that engagement. Where it comes in. Where it's a little bit harder of a sell is in some of the administrative roles within the hotels, the finance, and maybe the sales. But what is interesting is, because of the way our industry is, the celebrations, the inclusivity, the things that we do for our team members to engage them, they are all done on site, and it drives people to the offices, and it drives people to be here and part of that culture and that environment, because a lot of the things that we do are here, and they're actual physical things. And our spaces, our common spaces, are very warm and inviting and safe, and that's generally what it is. But I mean, our employees are locally based, and they want to be here. They want the interaction with the people, and we tend to attract team members that want that camaraderie, and they want it in person. And I mean, we saw it when we recalled the team members back. Some of them were home for almost 2 years, and just the sheer joy of being back in a room with people and talking and physically being there is what they wanted, but it is getting a little more difficult from those administrative positions. And that's where the flexibility comes in, where maybe we can move to a hybrid, but there are moments that you must be in the office because some of the things are people driven, specific. You have clients walking in the building, you need to show them the hotel, you need to see them personally, and that doesn't lend itself as well to a remote, especially when you're trying to, bring light and warmth of hospitality to the world. That is really a one-on-one person type of business.
Nicole, go ahead. You were going to mention something as well.
I was just gonna to build on what Hanan said. I think flexibility, similar realities between our corporate type of roles versus our frontline. Most of you would know at this point that the methodology to take blood specimen requires us to be with you. And who knows, technology is evolving and that may change in the future. I would say also that what we're observing is when we're hiring now for corporate types of role, finance, HR, others, it's one of the first questions that candidates are asking, will I have the flexibility? And so we have those conversations right from the start. Yes, you will have the flexibility. However, let's be clear that as part of your role, you will also be required to come in. So it's not like see you in a year and that never happens again. And so we're really being mindful of the reasons why people are coming in. So we've seen an influx over the last 2 months as we transition from nobody coming in the office to reopening. I anticipate that that will stabilize because we haven't seen each other. It will stabilize. And again, we are trying to really change how people view it. And why are we getting together? What's the purpose behind it? How do we leverage more of a brainstorming environment for solving issues as opposed to being in the office and putting my headset on and not talking to anyone? So.
Laura, we're going to switch gears with you and kick off another topic, and we've touched a bit on recruitment. One of the big outputs of the pandemic was when the economy started to roar back to life, there was a huge labor shortage. And how have you, or have you even experienced the issue and the tightness of the labor market in your business, and how are you dealing with it?
So yes, we're in an interesting industry. We've got pockets of our organization where we are extremely tight in terms of the labor market, and then we have other pockets where we don't have much turnover, which is fantastic. So how have we been dealing with the tight labor market? It's threefold. It's recognizing that you have to look within your organization and highlight the employees that you have internally and look to develop and perhaps accelerate that development for a couple of different reasons. But one of the key for me is to retain those employees. Secondly, we have been looking further afield with some of our roles. So, a bit back to the concept of flexibility, looking at, if that role was traditionally supposed to be based in Ontario, but, this person wants to be based in BC or even further afield, then it's looking at how we can do that and how we can leverage that talent and that expertise into the organization. And then I think it's back to something that Nicole was just saying, where as you are dealing with people on the way into the organization, you're starting to see those kinds of questions around flexibility and around how they're going to work with us. And being clear about it, being able to, delineate that, yes, we will be flexible, but there will be times that we need to bring them into the organization so that there's clarity on the way in. And then, of course, it's looking at how you adjust and flex in terms of some of the other asks that they may have around the role, and being flexible while still looking at what your business objectives are and where you need to be as an organization.
Well, what about LifeLab's business and trying to make sure that you're always filling filling the roles that you need, and I think Laura, you touched on a good point, also keeping the people from leaving.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We're having that exact conversation with some of our business leaders, because sometimes they'll say, well, we need you to recruit faster. And sometimes we'll say, well, what are we doing to keep those resources? Because if you're recruiting at the same pace as people are leaving, then that's not good for anyone in the end. A lot of the things Laura mentioned are essential. I would add that, to me, compensation in under current market condition, you have to be competitive. You have to be flexible. If that's not there, then you're not even going to be invited to the dance. But beyond that, I do believe that there are other essential elements around what's the purpose of your organization, what's the culture, what's your values, what are the view of the organization, not just lip service, but actual action around inclusiveness, DEI, around the environment. So I think it's if you're able to convey more of the fulsome offering that you have, I think you can more easily compete and certainly attract individual, not just for the short term. Do I think it's easy? No, it's a candidates market. It'll be interesting to see over the next 6 to 12 months, depending on what happens with the recession, if anything will change as far as those dynamics.
We'll get to predictions near the end. So the good foreshadowing. And then what about at Hilton in terms of keeping, retaining, anything creative that you're trying to do, or if you've had to do to ensure that you have the employee base to deal with a really large consumer base?
Absolutely. The availability of labor is really the single biggest change and challenge for hotels and restaurants. And all hotels and restaurants in any region they're actively looking, they're actively hiring right now to meet those customer demands. And as Laura said, I agree. Right now, the first thing you need to look at is your internal talent, and how do we develop that talent? How do we grow that talent to engage them, to keep them? Do we fast track promotions that perhaps would have taken a year or so of sort of training and career planning to get to? Do we jump a lot faster and have some of that training done on the job to keep them and move them into new roles that they may not have moved as quickly in pre-pandemic? So that's some of the things that are happening. Taking risks on some of our employees and saying, okay, we're going to take a risk and we're going to offer you this opportunity because we think there's potential there, and we're going to grow you as you do it. I think what's really important to look at as well is partnering with industry partners. And for us, it's local hospitality schools, and not just sort of, yes, we'll take your co-op students, but more of an actual sit down conversation partnership. How do we reignite the industry? How do we make it sexy and appealing to people again? And how do we work together to fill those labor shortages? And I think that's where success is to partner with those partners and those schools in the area, as well as we're starting in a lot of different regions in the country, is to look outside of the traditional hospitality stream for talent. What else is out there that maybe was not tapped before because we had an influx of hospitality talent coming in? There were lineups of people waiting to come and work in the hotels. So how do we engage community centers, different groups and communities in our areas, in our regions, that were maybe untapped before? And I think that excites team members, because then you've got more diversity, then you have things that are different and unseen before. And a lot of the things that we do in hospitality, a lot of the perks and benefits and the things that we do just as a norm in the industry, once you start tapping into these different markets, they start seeing that. And we've been able to bring people in from not-for-profit and from other regions or other sectors that just went, we had no idea hotels were like this. So it's really about putting the word out there, because some of our practice is already amazing. It's just now selling it to people that perhaps never thought of hospitality before.
It's a great point that all three of you made, that the way that you're dealing with the recruitment challenge is by trying to solve the retention issue and not just looking at the new, but trying to keep what you have. And I think that's a really good point that often gets missed when we're trying to say, well, we need people to do these jobs. Well, let's just make sure that we don't have that opening happen, and it makes it much easier. One of the things, Nicole, that you mentioned at the beginning of your answer was it's more than just compensation, and you have to look at a whole host of things. And one of those things coming out again of the pandemic was these blurred lines between work and home, people feeling as though they were constantly working all the time, and whether there was a point where we needed to really institute a work-life balance or some sort of wellness regime. And then, as everyone knows, as I said at the top of the call, Ontario, prior to the election, implemented the disconnected from work requirement for employers in Ontario 25 or more to have a policy. How has that impacted the discussion at your company, and what's your view on best practices to make sure that when you have that new candidate that asks, well, how much am I going to work? Because a lot of us at the end of the day, we're constantly in client service type business. So it's not as easy just to say, well, we can promise you'll only be working 9 to 5. And then obviously we have overtime obligations. It's a tricky issue. So Nicole, I'll start with you before going to Hannah.
Yeah, so I think I would go back to the comment I made at the beginning about our people strategy. And one of our pillars is life healthy. And life healthy means wellness, means keeping our employees safe during a pandemic. It means providing an environment where they can feel that they can thrive. And so when we looked at the Ontario directive around the right to disconnect, we really looked at it in the context of wellness. And that really helped us kind of determine, and maybe some of the lawyers on the call may not be happy with that, but we didn't approach it as a policy. We really approach it as guidelines to employees and leaders, and providing areas to consider as they work together around that work-life balance. And so we reinforce, obviously, our people strategy, our life healthy, to be mindful of respecting hours of work and not automatically assuming that somebody will be available for overtime. We are trying to really be better at scheduling meetings. We have operations across Canada, so not expecting somebody from BC to be on a call at 6 a.m. We've instituted, wherever possible, a Friday free of meetings. Sometimes we're good at it, sometimes we're not. But we're also engaging or encouraging leaders and employees in having conversations about expectation and what is considered urgent. Because at the end of all this, it's about flexibility. And so that's the lens that we've really tried to reinforce, so that it's not a policy and somebody says, okay, you know what, I worked an extra 2 minutes today and what's happening? Okay, but maybe I gave you flexibility yesterday because you had other obligation. So those are some of the guidelines or the concepts that we've communicated and are reinforcing.
And then what about you and Hilton and the surprise before the election to implement this disconnect from work policy?
Well, I mean, absolutely. As Nicole said, I think it's important, and what we did, and we spoke to our teams and really said, we need to find a balance. And the challenge with with the regulation and the rule is that in a 24/7 operation, we don't, the doors don't close at 5 p.m. We are 24/7, and people are working around the clock. And it's really more around what is urgent, what is an emergency, and what can wait in a 24/7 operation. There are, and with that flexibility of offering to our team members, some people work better in the evenings, some people work better in the mornings, and really talking to our teams and saying, because the email comes in doesn't mean you have to respond to it if it's not during your working hours, because it might be during somebody else's working hours. So the night manager will send out emails to people, but that doesn't mean you're expected to respond to it if you're the day shift. So really educating our teams about the email coming in is not a panic. You do not have to answer it the minute it comes in. You turn your phones off, you turn your computers off, you take the time that you need with your families. For me, for example, I'm a night owl. I do my best work in the evening, and the teams know, my team specifically knows that you may receive things from me at certain hours. I don't want to hear from you until I know it's your time. And it's really about speaking to the teams and having those conversations one-on-one to saying, this is how it applies to you because of your hours, the times that you work, the schedules that you have. From our hourly team member perspective, I mean, across the industry, not as much of a change for them. Many of our industry properties are unionized. Those rules are already in our collective agreements. So there really is very little change for our hourly team members. This really affects our managers, our middle managers, and our salaried team members that are really working around the clock. And it's everybody's trained on it. And those individual discussions about what does this look like for you because of the nature of your job and the nature of your schedule, and how, when you respond and when you don't respond. And that's what's worked for us, because the first question is, but we're 24/7, Hanan, how do I not respond? Like, this is how you respond and this is how you not respond. I think that's what's worked for us, and that's how we've been rolling it out to our properties in Ontario.
From one 24/7 operation to another, the news doesn't stop, Laura. So when you had this policy that was implemented and you're dealing with, lots of people who are saying that they are feeling burned out, how have you been trying to manage the burnout cycle, the issue of now having a regimented policy that, at least whether it's guidelines or whatever, trying to provide some direction to your senior leaders as to how we want people to behave in the office?
So for us, it's a combination of what both Hanan and Nicole talked about. It's really about, there's the policy, and in order to meet some of our union requirements, we do have a policy that's written and in place. But very much like Hanan said, for our hourly employees, it's not as much of an issue. And even for some of our journalists, because of their unionized situation, it's not as much. And for our leaders, it was about talking to them about modeling the kind of behavior that we want them to encourage and have their leaders and their managers engage in. So it was very much about, these are guidelines. We have to be flexible. We have to be able to identify what's important and what's urgent, just like what Hanan said. And then we have to make it okay for them. And I think that's a key one, especially in our business, because there's a tendency, it's news, it's information that we have to get out, and we have to meet certain deadlines. So there is a tendency for our people to jump in and jump on it. So it's helping them to understand how they prioritize and engage, and how they build that comfort for their managers and their leaders to say, you know what, I can wait until tomorrow for this, or I can flex with my teams, and here's how I can do it, and providing them those tools. So it's very much a learning journey that we're all on, and we're continuing to perfect.
That's
Andy,
great. Go ahead, Nicole.
Can I just
Yeah, of course.
just to reinforce what Laura said around showing the right example. A few weeks ago, we had a people leader webinar, virtual meeting, and there was about 300-400 of our supervisors, managers, and our CEO reinforced that he had just gone on vacation and did not check his emails. Reinforced, thankfully, that he had confidence in his direct reports, but that was such an important message coming from him, reinforcing that your wellness, my wellness, his wellness is key, and there are ways of disconnecting. But he also reinforced the importance of ensuring that your team is empowered, because while you're away, they can make decisions. I know it's not directly related to all the policy that we're talking about, but I think it builds on creating an environment where it's okay to disconnect at all levels.
That's a really great point. We had a meeting yesterday with one of another really valued client, and just wonderful people to work with, and great discussions about what they have done. And it's similar to all of your organizations. It was very much, well, we've kind of always done this. We've always tried to behave this way. It's really just sharpened our focus, which I really take from what all the three of you have said is we had practices, whether you had it as individuals or not, you're trying to model it, and now it's kind of just spread. So as we start to get near the end of the discussion, let's start looking forward. Nicole, you said recession early on. We know that the headlines are dominated by lots of bad news. We have a war that's continuing to go on in Ukraine, high inflation, a lot of change in social issues. Laura, if you look at the HR world, what are you thinking is going to be the issue or the challenge that's going to be lying on your desk over the next 6 months to a year?
I think I would pick two if I could. They are retention and also I think wellness and wellness as you scope it, like you just said, Andy, there is so much coming at people external to their working life, and being able to process that, deal with it, manage it, and still do their best day to day at work. I think that's going to be a key issue for us. Part of wellness I see is actually things like balancing work and life, and how organizations help individuals to do that, and how we help them to leverage a series of tools that can help them be more effective in their roles. And then I think I see it'll be interesting to see, if we move into a full-blown recession, how that might affect the labor market and how that might impact us. And certainly I see retention is key for organizations, because you want that continuity of knowledge. You want to be able to keep your processes moving forward, and continue to deliver on your strategies. And having those key people to your organization, I think, are going to be very, very important.
So Hanan, you and Nicole have the challenge of being second and third on this one. Retention and wellness, we're going to use as a given. I'm not going to say that you can't use that, but is there another challenge that you think that is being overlooked, or is just something that you are predicting when you look at kind of your business and your role?
I don't know if it's being overlooked, but I think safety is going to be a big topic that's going to come across all of our desks, and not just in hospitality. Safety for our team members, safety for our guests and our clients, and what does that look like in the changing environment, whether it be health and safety, mental health and safety, whether it be pandemic related, whether it be violence in the workplace, violence in the community. So how do we keep our teams safe? How do we keep our guests safe? And what impact or role do we have as an industry to keep the community as a whole around us safe? And I think that's probably going to be, in addition to what Laura mentioned, a big hot topic for us.
Thanks, Hanan. So Nicole, and like I said, you set up the economic challenges as well, which I think everybody has top of mind. What else do you see kind of on the horizon?
Well, I think it ties into what Laura and Hanan said. I would go to empathy and trust. So at the core of retention, we talked about culture, we talked about the environment, we talked about engagement, the relationship you have with your leader. So really continuing to show empathy and building trust with your employees, I think will be core. And that's not always easy when you as an individual are leading a group and also managing maybe the angst that you're feeling with all the unknown. What I would add also is there is going to be a lot of unknown. So how do we help our employees, I guess, recognize or accept in their own way that there will be a lot of uncertainty over the next 6 months? And I know pivot and resilience are overused word for the last few years, but I think how do we build that resilience, that agility in our employees? And that's not just going to be good for the next 6 months, but truly believe in building their capabilities for the future.
The uncertainty never goes away, especially where we're trying to manage a return to office. We're trying to stay ahead of what has been an unpredictable pandemic, and hoping that we're not going to see, a seventh wave. I've lost track. Hopefully, it's done with that level of infection. But I think those are all really, really good points. Another thing that I contemplate is knowing that Ontario is going to have the requirement for their employee monitoring policy, and you'll hear lots about that from us heading into the October deadline. I do think that's going to be an interesting thing as well. As the more we have these policies, the more questions end up on the desks of all of you and all of the people who are in attendance. So it's going to be, as they say, the only constant is change. So probably some good comments from everyone. Final question, as we're getting closer to the top of the hour. We're always fortunate in our practice because we get to work with lawyers, we get to work with HR professionals, other leaders in organization, as do you have lots of different audiences. But if you were to look back now, and we're speaking to people who are going to be entering the HR field, what advice would you give them? It's been a crazy last few years, and everything has really been changed, and it's really focused on, I think, the importance of people management, people leadership. So Nicole, if you were to talk to kind of your younger self, what would you say?
I would say really make sure you have an interest in business. And to me, like, that's where it starts. You have to have business acumen. What business acumen meant 20 years ago versus in the future, I think it's really around insights, around data to support better decisions. So, but also having a desire to link the people strategies to what the business is trying to achieve is critical. Gone are the days where they maybe have been disconnected. So that's one. Two, I come back to a real desire to work with people. And so if that's not like intrinsic to who you are as an individual, and not just because of the soft stuff, but truly because you can influence your organization, your leaders, by developing program, by helping them really be successful in light of what's changing and what the expectations are of our leaders. And maybe a quick third one is comfort in the gray. Who would have thought that we would have to implement mandatory vaccination last year? The right to disconnect, the one that you just spoke about. These rules are not written, and constantly adapting and helping your organization lead through that is another critical element.
Thanks, Nicole. Laura, you've had the opportunity to work in a number of different industries across a number of different roles. When you look back now, what advice do you think would be really helpful to someone who maybe wants to follow in your footsteps?
So, at the risk of it sounding like a cop-out, I would say that very similar to what Nicole said. It's all about for me, it's about the business acumen. It's about you working as a partner. You are working in partnership with your clients inside the business, and having that knowledge and that desire to have that knowledge, I think, just makes you far more effective. It helps you in how you develop whatever strategies you're going to suggest to them in resolving whatever they're trying to resolve, or implement whatever they're trying to implement. I think not being afraid to be, your authenticity is important, because part of what this is about is your empathy, your ability to connect with employees and with leaders, and to bring them along a spectrum to getting those results. And so, I truly resonate with what Nicole said in terms of if you don't have an affinity for people, this is probably not the role that you need to get into. And then I think one of the other keys is so important now, and I think so important into the future, is your ability and your facility with data, and using data and information to drive what you are doing, how you're presenting, and how you're showing an organization you're going to make a difference. I think those are absolutely key.
Great point on the data, because that is something where it's seemingly becoming more and more common with human resources. So thanks for that, Laura. And Anne, the final word goes to you. So you've had all of these good answers, so there's no
Yeah,
pressure.
great answers. No pressure at all. I mean, the only thing I would add to what Laura and Nicole were saying would be, the nice thing about our profession as human resources professionals is that it's not just one thing. And human resources is many things, and you can do so many things within human resources. And it's important, if I were, speaking to my younger self, to identify what it is about human resources that you enjoy. Some of us are generalists, some of us are specialists in a specific field or specific area. So it really has opportunities for everybody to decide what part of human resources they like. And I think it's important that you identify how it fits with what your goals are and what your values are and what you enjoy doing and where your skill sets are. But I think to tie in with the people side of it, I mean, it's really about being of service. Our role is to be of service. And I recognize it might be easier in sort of a service or hospitality area, but our teams, our business are my guests, and I don't see the external guests, I see the internal guests. And you really need to be comfortable and be happy and be a driver of being of service to others. And really be the advocate. And, if that is something that you're unsure how to do, then, practice, learn, understand what advocacy means and how to use your voice to advocate for your teams, for your business, and how to make that work.
Well, this has been a great way to spend an hour and the last Friday of June before we really hit summer season. So thanks to Nicole, Laura, and Hanan for giving your time and sharing your insights. You're great partners to work with, and so really appreciate you joining me today and all of our listeners. So thanks very much. Not a lot of reminders at the end of this one. There's going to be a post-event email. Like I said, you'll be able to hear from Laura, Nicole, and Hanan on our recording. And this is it for the summer. So we will be back with our monthly webinars on Friday, September 30th. You can trust that if there is any sort of important legal development over the summer or in the employment and labor realm, we will be hosting webinars, so you won't get rid of us that easily. But in terms of this series, the next scheduled webinar, Friday, September 30th, you'll see an invitation. And other than that, thanks to everyone again for attending. We're wishing you and your families a happy, safe, and healthy summer, and hopefully somewhat hot, but not overly hot. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.